Hello, and welcome to the 2017 Mvskoke Creek Nation National Council Creek District Debate hosted by Mvskoke Media. I'm Jessica McBride, and I'll be your host for today. We want to thank both of our candidates for coming today to participate in this debate. Our two candidates are Mr. Patrick Freeman and former Mvskoke Creek Nation Principal Chief George Tiger. Welcome to both of you. Thank you for coming. Candidates, we will not have a time limit to answer these questions. I will alternate which candidate initially responds to each question, after which the other candidate will have a chance to respond. The questions could revolve around tribal issues, your platform, personal views, or items pertinent to the position. If you're both ready, we'll begin. Mr. Freeman, this first question is for you. Will being a council representative be your only employment? If not, will you miss work to attend meetings?
I probably will be working. I'm a self-employed contractor consultant, and I am always working. But I will be missing work. I've done it in the past. I've worked several states away and was always found time to get back to all the pertinent things I needed to get to when I had to in Oklahoma.
Chief Tiger, I'll repeat the question and give you a chance to respond. Will being a council representative be your only employment? If not, will you miss work to attend meetings?
Well, certainly it's a part-time position that's full-time. And I would certainly commit my time as a full-time council member. And I think it's important. You have to have certainly a strong commitment in wanting to be certainly a council member. And serving on the council before, I know that there's times late at night that you may get a call for an emergency for some of your constituents' needs. So I know that will continue, and so I look forward to serving in a full-time capacity.
Chief Tiger, this next question is for you. Are you currently under contract for any entity or organization outside of the Mvskoke Creek Nation, or do you have any previously undisclosed business interests?
Well, right now I do have a position on an economic development board with another tribe. Also am a member of a number of boards in economic development, basically because of the fact that during my administration the growth in economic development has been recognized by other tribes, and I have served in a consultant role to help in those areas with other tribes.
Mr. Freeman, I'll give you a chance to respond, and I'll repeat the question. Are you currently under contract for any entity or organization outside of the Mvskoke Creek Nation, or do you have any previously undisclosed business interests?
I am currently, as a consultant, you work for a lot of people and entities, and I do work closely with in federal contracting, where everything is transparent. You work for different entities. I consult for tribal 8As. I work for construction companies and advise accordingly. I don't have any other business interest that what I do, as my employment, that what I currently do. There's no, attached business interest that I have that I have not disclosed.
Okay. Mr. Freeman, this question is for you.
Okay.
Are you going to propose or support legislation that allows Mvskoke Creek citizens residing outside of the jurisdiction to receive benefits, and if so, what type of benefits?
I think that the benefits that for the people that live outside the jurisdiction, I think if they are citizens and that live outside the boundaries, take for instance, I have family members that live outside the boundaries, and they should feel free that they are entitled to the same benefits, even though that if it's a jurisdictional criteria that they have to meet, that may exclude them, but that's their choice of living outside our jurisdiction. But outside of that, I think all citizens, all at-large citizens, are do all of our services.
Chief Tiger, I'll allow you a chance to respond. Are you going to propose or support legislation that allows Mvskoke Creek citizens residing outside of the jurisdiction to receive benefits, and if so, what type of benefits?
Well, first of all, I've always been a proponent for our citizens that live outside jurisdiction to have access to programs that we may have if they're tribally funded. We are mandated by federal policies and guidelines when it comes to federal funding that has to be within the jurisdiction of the Mvskoke Creek Nation. However, I think that any legislation that's proposed, if it's tribal monies that we use, everyone should have access to those programs. It would be in addition to what they get now, for instance, like higher education. There are some tribally funded social service programs that they have an entitlement to. And basically, I think it's important that we are able to propose legislation because it would just basically be following the Constitution. In the Constitution, it says that all citizens have entitlements, and that with that in mind, I think that any legislation for at-large citizens that lives outside of jurisdiction should have access for tribally funded programs. And I would hope that the tribal funds that we're using now, that those guidelines are not following the federal guidelines. There is a difference. I feel like that we are a sovereign nation. Those tribal funds should have a little more of a liberal policy in terms of allowing people who live outside the jurisdiction to have access to them.
Chief Tiger, the next question is for you. What specific legislation are you going to propose if you're elected?
Well, you know, one of the things that I've always been a big supporter of is that we should have a roadmap of some of the things that we as a council want to be able to pursue as far as goals and objectives in helping with the administration with their goals and objectives. And having said that, I believe it's in Proverbs 29:18. It says that without a vision, the people perish. So with those things in mind, I think that any time that we can enhance what we're doing as a nation in funding, which we already do with a lot of federal programs with our own monies by supplementing those programs with tribal monies, that anytime that there's any kind of legislation, whether it's being proposed by me or a colleague, if it means the betterment of our citizens, by all means I would be a big supporter of that.
Mr. Freeman, what specific legislation are you going to propose if elected?
My main focus really is kind of our processes, the way we create a built environment, and I mean from the start to finish, the turnkey type thinking, where we're programming buildings, we're going through all the analysis, getting the right spatial needs and the right just the right built environment that houses our programs. I think we struggle with a lot of things that when we build things, we are not really enforcing some of the general, codes and things that really everybody else does, outside of the Creek Nation or any other tribe that does not have any compliancy with the building codes and just regulations. I think we need to strengthen our processes with our the way we vet and interview our designers, our professional service people. I think that's a good key ingredient. While we hand off our program to designer, we really need to focus and make sure that we're getting the right building for the right thing, because we come back and revisit so many of our things that we have just built. And I know that the programs that need the right building for the right service, and that's a key for our services, just to improve our services generally.
Jessica, could I respond to that?
Yes, I'll allow you a chance to respond.
Okay, I agree that I think we should be careful in terms of the codes that we follow. As a sovereign nation, when I was on the council before, we did pass an international code for projects that basically provides the opportunity for the Mvskoke Creek Nation to have codes that's in excess of what the state codes have to offer. I think that's real important. I remember the discussions and debates that were held at that time was basically to allow for those codes to be a roadmap for us, per se. And I think sometimes where we may have a downfall, maybe to a certain degree, is because our construction services department may need to do a better job of the oversight and making sure that they're monitoring our projects.
Would you like a chance to respond?
Well, I think that absolutely we need to, and I understand that we adopted the international building codes. That's a great step. I think most tribes should, and, you know, that gives them a groundwork and a foundation to have enforcement in mind and compliance in mind. Even though we're a sovereign nation, we still get services from outside our jurisdiction. You know, we buy other city utilities, and we need to be compatible with those types of services. I think that if we could create a code division compliance within the tribe, or else have agreements that will never, you know, damage our, put our sovereignty at risk, where we have agreements with cities that they get to have courtesy reviews, courtesy inspections, and we really need to look at that. You know, we spend a lot of money, you know, on buildings, and we expect. I think we should expect the same value in our construction dollar that everybody else that receives.
Mr. Freeman.
Could I respond?
Okay.
Okay, and I agree. But the one thing in being a sovereign nation is that you have the ability to have agreements. There's waivers by the city and county in some instances with some of the projects that we've had, and came to a gentleman's agreement. And again, it was basically because they all agreed that the International Building Codes that was established by the Mvskoke Creek Nation is a solid code. And again, flexing our sovereign muscle, as well as those in the municipalities and counties, they're doing the same thing. So there is always that opportunity to have the ability to come to an agreement on those.
Next question is for Mr. Freeman. What information would you require as a council representative in order to vote on property purchases, business ventures, etc.?
Certainly, you know, you have a good thing in mind when you buy and seek out property. I think just location is, if location is driving, you know, that want to buy property. We really, you know, all the things that you know require for market studies, feasibility studies, just analysis of where you're at. But does that, once again, that's part of the process, is that I'd like to see us really look into, research a little harder, be really sophisticated owners, and find out if that's the right property that we really need, you know, and we really want to spend our time and our money investing in and improving, you know, because we will be developers, and we want to develop the best piece of property and asset that we can for the tribe.
So if elected as a council rep, and that type of information is not available if the executive branch presents a purchase opportunity or anything like that, would you decline to vote on that legislation?
Yes, I think so.
Okay. Chief Tiger, same question. What information would you require as a council representative in order to vote on property purchases, business ventures, etc.?
Well, I think Patrick and I are both in agreement on some of the things that he's stated. But the main thing is that I think that, and it's a very valuable lesson that myself has learned, is that, first of all, we are a nation that has allowed in our budget process to set aside a certain amount of money for organization or economic development. With that in mind, I think that there are periods of time, even now, where there's certain properties that are pursued, and at times we don't even have a blueprint to follow in terms of how we're going to use it, what it's going to be used for, how much money it may take. I think one of the problems that we have as a nation, is not only Creek Nation but other tribes, is that if you're pursuing a piece of property or a building, whatever it may be, when people hear it's a Creek Nation, all of a sudden that price of property and what have you goes up, because they feel like that we have all these casinos and we have unlimited resources as far as money is concerned. And that's not particularly the case because of the budget process that we have in place. I would certainly ask the administration, if they're presenting something for these things, to make sure that a good decision is made. If those things aren't available to the council, and I would ask that we would certainly postpone it until at such time when that type of information can be received by the council as a whole, or through the committee that it goes through, or through a joint committee it may go through.
So if you were to be proposed a business opportunity, is there any time that you would see yourself, if that information wasn't available, that you might vote yes, even though that business plan or anything wasn't there, so that someone else doesn't raise the price on Creek Nation?
Well, I must say I think your question is contradiction to some degree, because number one, I am one vote. Pat is elected, he is one vote. It takes a committee majority vote. Mm-hmm. If I'm asked, again, if that information that we need as a committee or me as a council member, I would make sure that everything is in place at the committee level, and then it's going to be voted on the floor for all the whole council to vote on, that if at such time that everything is in place, I would vote for it.
Okay. Do you need any opportunity to respond? No. Okay. Chief Tiger, the next question is for you. Are you going to propose legislation that creates an at-large council representative voted on by the citizens?
Well, number one, I think the council themselves would have to have, we're at the will of the people that we serve, our constituents. If it's the will of the people that that's something they would like to see. As a council, we have to follow their lead. If it is the will of people and at such time it needs to be addressed, I certainly would be in favor of addressing such legislation. I believe that in the past that there has been a at-large, I believe it was called, I believe it was at-large 9, I think it was at one time, that legislation. I think that it's time that we really need to look at it, because, you know, we've grown so much. The monies that we have, certainly from the federal government, has not grown with the population that we serve. But still yet, the people who live outside jurisdiction certainly has to have a voice, I think, on our national council.
If that legislation was proposed, let's say today, and you were sitting on the national council, would you be in favor of it?
Yes, I would be. And I've always been in favor of having the opportunity for citizens that live outside jurisdiction to have a voice on our council.
Mr. Freeman, I'll repeat the question for you. Are you going to propose legislation that creates an at-large council representative voted on by the citizens?
I would have to agree with Mr. Tiger. I would be more of a presented to the tribe as a whole, as a referendum vote, possibly, to see if that is a need, and that for an at-large seat.
Okay. Mr. Freeman, this is your final question. How familiar are you with the policies, procedures, the Mvskoke Creek Nation Constitution, the code, and writing law?
That is probably one of the areas that I do not probably have the experience that you know, my fellow candidate here for Creek District. I have worked for the tribe in the past. I've experienced a lot of our policies as an employee. I have also worked with other tribes in other areas, and I think that I would just be kind of at a learning curve. But I know that I learn fast. I know that I would develop policies, write and craft legislation that's you know, that's inclusive for all citizens. I really would just really have to just catch up, but I would you know, just welcome that challenge.
Have you read the Constitution?
I've read parts of the Constitution. I have not read things but as I've looked and researched little items, I have read the little parts of the Constitution, but not all the way through.
Okay. Chief Tiger, same question. How familiar are you with the policies, procedures, the MCN code and Constitution, and writing law?
Well, number one, I certainly haven't served on the council and have served as a speaker for the council, and as principal chief, you have to be very knowledgeable of the Constitution. It is the supreme law of the land. It supersedes anything else, whether it's someone's opinions or whatever the case may be. As far as writing laws, I think that every individual that serves on a national council should know how to write a law, and working with the administration should know about how to write policies. I've always maintained, right now we're probably following laws that are outdated or antiquated that needs to be brought up to date. And when I was speaker, I used to tell my colleagues that no law if we pass a law, it doesn't necessarily mean it can't be changed, because it can be. And I think it's important that as an individual and as a council that we really must look at our policies, our laws, and being familiar with the Constitution, because we do take an oath to protect and adhere to the Constitution of the Mvskoke Creek Nation. I am familiar on how to write legislation, and of course it's not a law until it's passed by the National Council and signed off by the Principal Chief, then it becomes law.
Have you read the code and the Constitution?
Yes, yes. And the other thing too I think is real important as far as National Council is concerned is that we must adhere to our rules of procedure and policies in-house with the council. I think in the past we haven't always done that as a council by passing certain things that really had no merit behind it, that may have addressed another level of jurisdiction in our government. I think it's important that we follow our rules of procedure and policies that we have within house of the National Council.
Chief Tiger, this is your final question. And this question is from Aaron, who lives in Tulsa. The cities of Tulsa and Jenks have requested that the Mvskoke Creek Nation contribute as much as $25 million of funding to construct a South Tulsa-Jenks low-water dam and set a deadline of December 31st, 2020 for the MCN to respond and commit funding. Should the MCN National Council respond before this deadline? And if so, will you support or oppose investing the Mvskoke Creek Nation funding being requested if elected?
Well, number one, I think that when you look at the request by the city of Tulsa, again, you're talking about another sovereign entity that's approaching another sovereign entity in terms of something that they want from the tribe. I've always maintained that we as Mvskoke Creek Nation, as a sovereign nation, can make our own decisions on where to put our monies and what to do in terms of those types of projects. I think it would have to be a careful study in terms of that. I think that a low river dam is something that the Vision 2025, I think it was, that was passed, has addressed. I know that the City of Jenks and the City of Tulsa would like to partner up with the Mvskoke Creek Nation. I don't know whether or not that request for funding is all at once. I think it's just a matter of maybe going through a process of a number of years to be able to achieve or reach that goal of the funding that is needed. That's my understanding of it. But I think that it's something that right now I couldn't support, because I don't know down the pike, so to speak, whether or not the tribe is able to take on that responsibility financially. I think it's important that we're in good fiscal standing within ourselves before we can make such a commitment. But I think it's something that probably needs to be looked into. But right now, I think I would have to be reserved in my approval of such a request.
Do you think there's better uses for the $25 million, and if so, where would you like to see it spent?
Well, anytime that you can spend it on your own people, that's the best way. And I think it's something that we certainly would have to look at. And we have to be good stewards of the monies that we have right now. And we have to even be better stewards in making sure that whatever investments we make is going to have a return at some point in time. We have entities now that, when I served on the council before, that spent millions of dollars on, and we haven't received a dividend or a return on our investment. It's been a number of years. Those types of things I think really need to be looked at. Again, our priority should be with our citizens. And as I stated earlier, the federal government has provided us with funding for all these years, but it really hasn't been any increase over all those years. Our enrollment has increased, but not our funding from federal government. So I think it's important that anything that we do, whether it's buying property, whether it's getting into business development or economic development, whatever the case may be, that we certainly want to look at the return on investments that we make. It's not always been that way, and that's important to our citizens that we do that. So I think that that has to be a priority, and that's for our citizens.
Mr. Freeman, I'll read the question so you can respond. And this question is from Aaron, who lives in Tulsa. The cities of Tulsa and Jenks have requested that the MCN contribute as much as $25 million of funding to construct a South Tulsa-Jenks low-water dam and set a deadline of December 31st, 2020 for the MCN to respond and commit funding. Should the MCN National Council respond before this deadline? And if so, will you support or oppose investing the MCN funding being requested if you were elected?
Once again, you know, being a planner and a kind of a designer, civic improvement has a lot of benefits, and a lot of benefits that we really don't see till it really develops. I think that when we're asked to participate in a capital improvement, you know, we're, like Chief says, we're really we're dealing with another sovereign entity, but we have a common goal of improving our built environment. I think I would support the legislation, but once again, of course, at that point in time, we would know more of information of what exactly it tells. What are we building? Are we just creating just a landmark for you know, just something that's not going to function within that's going to benefit our tribe, our properties that we have along the Arkansas River? And I think that as you look at things long range like that, those are exciting times, you know, because we're planning generations ahead. You know, we're improving you know, things that's really going to benefit people that we really can't see now. You know, and in the future will tell.
Do you think that so you today, if elected, you would vote for funding that project?
Yes.
Do you think the outcome, you referenced that citizens may see the benefit in the future since we have properties along that river? You would still support that project as opposed to using that funding for other programs such as health and things like that? Once
again, you know, not knowing what our really goal and intent would be for that, you know, I think that as opposed to what program that we're leaving out, I don't know, but you know, if we were, you know, if we had the opportunity, yes, I would support it.
Good. Yeah, and I'm going to go back to what Patrick just said, is that sometimes as a tribe we do not, we're not fair to ourselves in comparing our investments. For instance, the investment we made with the River Spirit and expansion and Margaritaville, Brand and all that was about a $370 million investment. We'll get a return on that much sooner than on any other project that we have right now. And it's not a fair comparison. If we're going to invest in an economic development, diversity, whatever the case may be, we have a bad habit of comparing what's happening in our gaming as to what our return on investment may be with, for instance, like Riverwalk. We did our homework before we bought Riverwalk, and basically it was because we knew that area was getting ready to explode as far as economic development is concerned. The city of Jenks certainly is still in the process of bringing an outlet mall in at some point in time. We just did a renovation and expansion at River Spirit. We have property north of Riverwalk that needs to be developed. Those types of things, you know, are investments that at majority of times it's not going to get a return on it like gaming is. So it's not always a fair comparison. I think that when you look at something like a Lower River Dam, basically it's not really about the Creek Nation in itself. It's about that area, that region. And you know, I'm right now, I'm saying I would not be in favor of voting for something like that, because we really need to look at improving our health care as it is. You know, there's a period of time whenever we've had people that have came in and have acknowledged that we really need to look at our health care. That is a priority. Thank you.
Would you like a chance to respond, Mr. Freeman? Okay. That's all the questions that I have. Thank you, Chief Tiger and Mr. Freeman, for coming in to answer these questions. And thank you, citizens, for tuning in to the Creek District debate. As a reminder, if you didn't vote in the primary election, you will still have the opportunity to vote in the general. The deadline to register as an absentee voter is October 12th, and the deadline to register as a precinct voter is October 25th. The general election is November 4th. We'll be hosting debates for Okfuskee, Okmulgee, Tulsa, and Tuckabutchee districts in the coming weeks, and we'll have those available here as well. If you have a question for one of these debates, please email it to jmcbride@mvskokemedia.com. We have also invited the winners of the McIntosh, Muskogee, and Wagner, Rogers, Mays districts to elaborate on their goals and their platform and what we can see for their upcoming term. So stay tuned to MvskokeMedia.com. Visit our social media sites, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and even Snapchat for all of our election coverage. And I want to thank you again for coming out. I'm Jessica McBride, and thank you for tuning in for the Creek District debate. Mado.
Thank you.